The universe had laws, physics, mathematics, causality. The fundamental rules that governed how reality functioned, from the dance of subatomic particles to the birth and death of galaxies. Civilizations rose and fell, empires expanded and collapsed, but the laws remained constant. Until they didn't. Space itself screamed. Lieutenant Commander Data's fingers moved across his console with superhuman precision, his positronic brain processing sensor readings that made no logical sense. The bridge of the USS Venture, a Nebula-class starship on routine survey duty along the Federation-Cardassian border, erupted into controlled chaos. "Captain," Data reported, his android voice perfectly calm despite the crisis, "I am detecting a massive subspace rupture forming at bearing 270 Mark 15. The energy signature is unlike anything in Starfleet records." Captain Edward Jellicoe, a stern, by-the-book officer who'd earned his reputation during the Cardassian conflicts, leaned forward in his command chair. On screen. The view screen shifted, and the bridge crew collectively inhaled. Space was tearing. A wound in reality spread across the star field like a crack in glass, bleeding colors that shouldn't exist, purple edged with white-hot energy, flickering with spatial distortions that made the eye hurt to follow. Gravitational waves rippled outward, and the Venture shuddered despite being thousands of kilometers away. "Shields up," Jellicoe ordered. "Red alert. Helm, full reverse. Get us clear of that thing." "Aye, sir." The Venture turned, her impulse engines flaring. But the anomaly was growing faster than they could retreat. "Captain," Data continued, "the rupture is destabilizing local subspace. If it continues to expand at this rate, it will collapse into a quantum singularity within 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Recommendations? Unknown, sir. I am detecting no conventional energy source maintaining the rupture. It appears to be self-sustaining through dimensional feedback." Jellicoe's jaw tightened. "Tactical. Prepare a photon torpedo spread. If we can't run from it, we'll collapse it." "Sir," the tactical officer, a young lieutenant named Hayes, said hesitantly, "firing into an unstable subspace anomaly could—" "I'm aware of the risks, Lieutenant. Lock torpedoes." "Torpedoes locked. Fire." 3 photon torpedoes streaked across space, their antimatter warheads glowing like miniature stars. They impacted the ruptured dead center, and everything went wrong. The explosion didn't close the wound, it widened it. The rupture flared, expanding in a brilliant cascade of energy. Spatial distortions hammered the Venture's shields, overloading power conduits across 3 decks. The ship listed to starboard, alarms screaming. "Shields down to 40%, Hayes shouted. "Helm, emergency warp, get us!" Data's voice cut through the chaos. "Captain, something is coming through." Jellicoe's eyes snapped to the view screen. From the heart of the rupture, a figure emerged. Not a ship, not debris, a person. They tumbled through the void, surrounded by a flickering energy field that pulsed and died as they cleared the anomaly. The figure went limp, drifting, unresponsive. Behind them, the rupture collapsed with a flash of light, sealing itself as suddenly as it had appeared. Silence fell across the bridge. "What the hell was that?" Jellicoe whispered. Data's fingers flew across his console. "Scanning. Sir, I am reading a single humanoid life sign. Weak but stable. They are wearing some form of protective armor, which appears to have generated a temporary kinetic barrier during transit." "A kinetic barrier?" "Yes, sir. The technology is unfamiliar, but functional. However, the barrier has now failed. The individual is exposed to vacuum. Life signs are deteriorating rapidly." Jellicoe didn't hesitate. "Transporter room. Emergency beam out. Lock onto that person and get them to sickbay. Now." "Locking on, sir. Energizing." On the view screen, the figure shimmered and vanished in a column of golden light. Jellicoe exhaled slowly, then turned to his first officer. "Commander Drake, you have the bridge. Data, with me. I want to know what or who just came through that rupture." Dr. Beverly Crusher had seen a lot of things in her years as a Starfleet medical officer. She'd treated Klingon warriors with honor wounds that should have killed them. She'd saved Borg drones mid-assimilation. She'd performed surgery on crystalline entities and gaseous anomalies that barely qualified as life by Federation standards. But this was new. The figure lay on the biobed, unconscious, still encased in armor that looked like something from a tactical nightmare. The suit was matte black, segmented, covered in hard plate composite that her medical scanners struggled to penetrate. A helmet obscured the face, angular, aggressive, with a glowing blue visor that had dimmed to black. Beverly worked quickly, her medical tricorder scanning, analyzing, attempting to assess injuries. "Computer," she said. "Remove the patient's helmet, carefully." Mechanical arms descended from the ceiling, gripping the helmet's edges. There was a hiss of depressurization, and the helmet released with a soft click. Beverly blinked. Human, male. Mid-30s, if she had to guess. Short dark hair, a scar across his left eyebrow, a jaw that looked like it had been broken and healed more than once. His face was pale, streaked with blood from a nasty gash along his temple. But that wasn't what made her pause. It was what the tricorder was showing her. "Oh my God," she breathed. The door to sickbay hissed open. Captain Jellicoe entered, Data at his side. "Doctor," Jellicoe said. "Status." Beverly didn't look up, her hands moving across the biobed's controls. "His physiology is human. DNA confirms it. But Captain, he's been augmented." Jellicoe's expression darkened. "Augmented? Like the eugenics wars?" "No." Beverly pulled up a holographic display of the patient's skeletal and nervous systems. "Look at this. Neural implants throughout his cerebral cortex, military grade, if I'm reading this correctly. Subdermal armor weaving under the skin, reflex accelerators in the motor cortex, biosynthetic muscle fibers, reinforced bone lattice." Data stepped forward, studying the display with fascination. "Remarkable. The integration is seamless. These augmentations were not forced upon him. They were designed to work with his biology." Beverly nodded. "Exactly. This wasn't arrogance or genetic superiority. This was..." She paused, searching for the word. "Preparation." "For what?" Jellicoe asked. "War," Beverly said quietly. This man was built to fight. The biobed's monitor beeped. Life signs stabilizing, blood pressure rising, neural activity increasing. "He's waking up," Beverly said. The patient's eyes snapped open. Not slowly, not groggily. Instantly alert, assessing, calculating. His hand shot out, grabbing Beverly's wrist with shocking speed. She gasped, and Jellicoe moved forward. But Data was faster, gripping the man's arm with android strength. "Release her," Data said calmly. The patient's eyes flicked to Data, then to Jellicoe, then back to Beverly. She saw the moment he made the calculation. 3 against 1. Unknown location, compromised position, and his grip relaxed. He let go. Beverly stepped back, rubbing her wrist. "It's all right. You're safe. You're in a medical facility." The patient sat up slowly, his eyes never stopping their scan of the room, taking in the equipment, the exits, the potential threats. "Where am I?" His voice was rough, controlled, carrying the weight of someone used to giving orders and receiving them. Jellicoe stepped forward, hands clasped behind his back in textbook Starfleet posture. "You are aboard the Federation starship Venture. I am Captain Edward Jellicoe. You came through a subspace rupture approximately 30 minutes ago. We transported you here to save your life." The patient's eyes narrowed. "Federation? What Federation?" "The United Federation of Planets," Jellicoe said. "We are a coalition of over 150 worlds dedicated to exploration, diplomacy, and mutual defense." The patient processed this, his expression unreadable. "Not the Citadel Council," he said slowly. "Not Alliance space, no Turian markings, no Asari ships." He looked directly at Jellicoe. "Either I've crossed into uncharted space, or I'm in a completely different universe." Data tilted his head. "The latter is most probable. The energy signature of the rupture was consistent with dimensional instability. You have likely traversed a barrier between parallel realities. The patient closed his eyes for a moment, and Beverly saw something flicker across his face. Not fear, but frustration, calculation, adaptation. When he opened his eyes again, he'd made peace with it. "All right," he said. "Different universe. That's fantastic." He swung his legs off the bio-bed, testing his balance. "How long was I out?" "Approximately 37 minutes, Data said. "Could be worse." He looked at Beverly. "My armor?" "Stored safely," Beverly said. "Along with your equipment. You were carrying quite an arsenal." The patient's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Habit." Jellicoe crossed his arms. "We've been honest with you. Now it's your turn. Who are you? Where did you come from? And why were you traveling through a subspace rupture?" The patient stood, slowly, carefully, assessing his physical condition with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been injured before. He was tall, lean, muscular, in the way soldiers were muscular. Every movement was controlled. He looked at each of them in turn. Then he spoke. "Commander Caden Shepard, Systems Alliance Navy, N7 Special Operations." He paused. "And I wasn't traveling through the rupture. I was thrown through it during a mission that went sideways." "N7?" Jellicoe repeated. "Special Forces, elite tier. We handle situations that regular military can't." Shepard's eyes were hard. "Black Ops, asymmetric warfare, impossible missions. Your galaxy is at war?" Data asked. Shepard's laugh was bitter. "My galaxy is always at war. Geth, Batarians, Collectors, Reapers." He looked at them. "Peace only exists because someone is always ready to pull the trigger." The sickbay went quiet. Jellicoe's expression was unreadable. "The Federation doesn't share that philosophy, Commander. We are explorers, scientists, diplomats first." Shepard met his gaze without flinching. "And that," he said quietly, "is why your enemies keep surviving." The silence that followed was deafening. Beverly saw Jellicoe's jaw tighten. Data's head tilted, processing. She herself felt a chill run down her spine, not because the words were cruel, but because they were honest. Before Jellicoe could respond, the comm system chirped. "Bridge to Captain Jellicoe." Jellicoe tapped his comm badge. "Go ahead." "Sir, we're receiving a Priority 1 transmission from Starfleet Command. Admiral Nechayev wants to speak with you immediately. It's about the individual we recovered." Jellicoe's eyes flicked to Shepard. "Understood. I'm on my way." He looked back at the N7 operative. "Commander Shepard, you'll remain here under Dr. Crusher's care. We'll continue this conversation shortly." Shepard nodded. "Not like I'm going anywhere." Jellicoe turned and left, Data following. Beverly exhaled slowly, turning to Shepard. "You should rest. Your injuries." "Will heal," Shepard interrupted. "Always do." He looked at her, and his expression softened. "Just slightly. Thank you, Doctor, for saving my life." Beverly managed to smile. "It's what we do." Shepard nodded, then looked toward the viewport, where stars streaked past at warp speed. "Different universe," he murmured. "Different rules, different threats." He was quiet for a moment. But war's the same everywhere. Beverly didn't have an answer for that. So she just watched as Commander Caden Shepard, a soldier from a galaxy that knew nothing but conflict, stared out at a universe that still believed in peace. And she wondered which of them was right. Captain Jellicoe stood at parade rest in front of the view screen, Admiral Alina Nechayev's face filling the display. The Admiral was in her early 60s, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and utterly without patience for nonsense. She'd earned her reputation as one of Starfleet's most pragmatic, some said ruthless commanders during the Cardassian conflicts. "Captain," she said without preamble, "I've reviewed your report on the individual you recovered. An N7 operative, special forces from another reality, augmented for combat." She leaned forward. "Is he a threat?" "Unknown, Admiral," Jellicoe said. He's been cooperative so far, but his entire philosophy is antithetical to Federation principles. He believes in military solutions, preemptive action, perpetual readiness for war. Nechayev's expression didn't change. And you disagree? Jellicoe hesitated. I believe the Federation's strength comes from our commitment to peaceful exploration. We defend ourselves when necessary, but we don't seek conflict. Captain, the Dominion is mobilizing in the Gamma Quadrant. The Borg are still a threat. The Cardassians are rebuilding, and our casualty rates in ground engagements are... She paused. Unacceptable. Jellicoe's eyes narrowed. Admiral, what are you suggesting? Nechayev's voice was cold and clear. I'm suggesting that perhaps this Commander Shepard arrived at exactly the right time. Starfleet Command is authorizing a trial advisory program. Shepard will review our combat readiness protocols and provide recommendations. Admiral, with respect, this is not a debate, Captain. The Federation is stretched thin. Our enemies are adapting faster than we are. If this operative can help us save lives, we're going to listen. She paused. But he will advise only. No command authority, no takeover. Just analysis and training recommendations. Clear? Jellicoe's jaw tightened. Crystal, Admiral. Good. Keep me updated. Nechayev out. The screen went dark. Jellicoe stood alone in his ready room, staring at the blank view screen. Then he tapped his comm badge. Jellicoe to Commander Shepard. A pause. Then, Shepard here. Commander, report to the briefing room in 1 hour. We need to talk about your galaxy's approach to warfare. Another pause. Understood, Captain. I'll be there. Jellicoe closed the channel. And outside the viewport, the stars continued their endless dance. Unaware that somewhere aboard the USS Venture, two philosophies were about to collide. One built on exploration and hope, the other forged in blood and survival. And neither would ever be quite the same again. The briefing room was smaller than the war rooms Shepard was used to. No holographic tactical displays spanning entire walls. No real-time casualty feeds. No constant stream of intelligence updates. Just a simple table, a few chairs, and a wall-mounted view screen. It felt almost quaint. Shepard stood at ease near the viewport, studying the stars rushing past at warp speed. Behind him, the door hissed open. Captain Jellicoe entered first, followed by his senior staff. Commander Drake, a no-nonsense woman with iron-gray hair who served as first officer. Lieutenant Commander Data, the android whose positronic brain Shepard found genuinely fascinating. Dr. Crusher, who'd already proven herself competent under pressure. And Lieutenant Commander Worf, the Klingon security chief whose reputation Shepard had learned about during his brief time in sickbay. Worf was exactly what Shepard expected. Massive, dangerous-looking, carrying himself like a warrior born. The kind of soldier you wanted at your back. But the rest? Scientists playing dress-up as military officers. Commander Shepard, Jellicoe said, taking his seat at the head of the table. Please, sit. Shepard turned from the viewport and sat, his movements controlled, economical. Captain, Jellicoe gestured to the assembled officers. You've met Dr. Crusher and Mr. Data. This is Commander Drake, my first officer, and Lieutenant Commander Worf, Chief of Security. Shepard nodded to each in turn. Worf returned the nod, a warrior's acknowledgement. I've been authorized by Starfleet Command, Jellicoe continued, to request your assistance in reviewing our tactical protocols. Admiral Nechayev believes your experience might provide valuable insights. Shepard raised an eyebrow. You want me to critique your military readiness? In essence, yes. And you're okay with that? Jellicoe's expression was carefully neutral. I follow orders, Commander. Whether I'm okay with it is irrelevant. Fair enough, Shepard thought. At least he's honest. All right, Shepard said, leaning back. Let's start with the basics. Tell me about your security training. Ground combat protocols. Rules of engagement. Worf straightened. Starfleet security personnel receive basic combat training at the Academy. Phaser qualification, hand-to-hand combat, tactical response procedures. Duration, approximately 8 weeks. Shepard blinked. 8 weeks? Total? Yes. And after that, officers are assigned to their posts. Additional training is provided on an as-needed basis. Shepard leaned forward, his expression incredulous. Let me get this straight. You give your security personnel 2 months of basic training, then throw them into active duty situations against hostile forces. Starfleet officers are trained primarily as scientists and explorers, Data interjected. Security duties are secondary to our primary mission of discovery and diplomacy. Secondary, Shepard repeated slowly. He looked at Jellicoe. Captain, what's your average casualty rate in ground engagements? Jellicoe's jaw tightened. That information is classified. Humor me. A pause. Commander Drake spoke quietly. Approximately 40% in hostile contact situations. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Shepard closed his eyes briefly. 40%. You're losing nearly half your people every time you put boots on the ground. We don't seek combat, Commander, Jellicoe said firmly. When it occurs, we defend ourselves. By dying, Shepard's voice was flat. You defend yourselves by dying in numbers that would get commanders court-martialed in my galaxy. Worf's growl rumbled through the room. We are Starfleet officers. We do not fear death. Shepard turned to him. I never said you feared it. I said you're dying unnecessarily. He stood, pacing. Fear has nothing to do with this. Courage doesn't stop bullets, or whatever your enemies are shooting at you. Training does. Tactics do. Knowing when to take cover, when to advance, when to fall back. We are taught to, Worf began. You're taught to be brave, Shepard interrupted. I get it. Honor, duty, standing your ground, all noble ideas. But Commander, can I ask you something? Worf's eyes narrowed. Speak. How many security officers have you lost under your command? The Klingon's expression darkened. 17. How many of those deaths were preventable? Silence. Worf didn't answer. Shepard turned to address the room. Look, I'm not here to insult anyone, but where I come from, a 40% casualty rate means you're doing something fundamentally wrong. It means your people are undertrained, your tactics are outdated, or both. Dr. Crusher spoke up, her voice careful. Commander Shepard, Starfleet isn't a military organization in the traditional sense. We're explorers who defend ourselves when necessary. I understand that, Doctor, and honestly, I respect it. The idea of exploring the galaxy, seeking out new life, advancing knowledge, that's noble. That's worth protecting. Shepard met her eyes. But how much knowledge are you going to advance if your people keep dying every time they encounter something hostile? Data tilted his head. You believe our training is insufficient. I believe, Shepard said carefully, that you're training scientists to do a soldier's job. And then you're surprised when they die like scientists instead of surviving like soldiers. Jellicoe's hands clenched on the table. We are not building an army, Commander. I'm not asking you to, but you could stop bleeding your people dry. Shepard gestured to Worf. Your security chief is a Klingon. Warrior culture born and bred. He probably knows more about combat than anyone on this ship. But I'm willing to bet he's never been given the resources, the authority, or the support to actually train your people properly. Am I wrong? Worf's expression was conflicted. Security training is limited by time constraints. Scientific duties take precedence. Exactly. Shepard turned back to Jellicoe. Captain, you said I'm here to review your protocols. So here's my review. Your people are brave, dedicated, and utterly unprepared for ground combat. And until that changes, you're going to keep losing them. Commander Drake leaned forward. What would you recommend? Shepard considered. Depends on how much you're willing to change. Bare minimum, expand combat training, teach your security teams proper cover usage, fire discipline, small unit tactics. Give them more than 8 weeks of basics. And maximum, Jellicoe asked. Create a dedicated tactical division. Officers who want to focus on security and defense. Train them like soldiers, not like scientists who occasionally shoot phasers. Establish proper doctrine, rules of engagement that prioritize survival and mission success, not heroic sacrifices. That would fundamentally alter Starfleet's structure. Data observed. Maybe, but it would also keep your people alive. Shepard looked around the table. Look, I get it. You're afraid of becoming what you fight against. Militarizing, losing your identity as explorers. But there's a difference between being prepared for war and being warlike. One keeps you alive. The other destroys who you are. The room was silent. Finally, Jellicoe spoke. You mentioned small unit tactics. Explain. Shepard allowed himself a small smile. How much time do you have? Computer, load program Shepard Alpha 1. The holodeck's black and yellow grid shimmered and transformed into a war zone. Ruined buildings. Smoking craters. The acrid smell of burned metal and ozone. In the distance, simulated weapons fire echoed. 12 Starfleet security officers stood in formation, phasers at the ready, looking around nervously. They were young. Mid-20s, most of them, fresh-faced and eager. Shepard studied them from the entrance, Worf standing beside him. These are your security personnel? Shepard asked. A representative sample, Worf confirmed. 8 weeks of academy training, 6 months of shipboard duty. Combat experience? Minimal. Holodeck simulations primarily. Shepard nodded. All right, let's see what they can do. He stepped forward, and the security team snapped to attention. At ease, Shepard said. I'm Commander Shepard. I'm here to observe your tactical capabilities. Commander Worf has programmed a scenario. Simulated hostile forces will attack your position. Your objective is to defend this area and neutralize the threat. Understood? Yes, sir, they chorused. Good. Take your positions. The security team spread out. Sort of. They formed a loose perimeter around the designated defense zone, but Shepard immediately noticed the problems. No overlapping fields of fire. No designated fallback positions. No communication plan. They were just standing there, waiting. Computer, Worf commanded. Begin simulation. The enemy appeared. Jem'Hadar warriors, brutal, efficient, born for combat. They materialized from multiple directions, weapons raised, moving with coordinated precision. The security team opened fire and died within 45 seconds. The first officer went down to a plasma rifle shot, standing in the open, making himself an easy target. The second tried to charge the enemy position and was cut down mid-sprint. The third took cover behind a destroyed vehicle, but it was facing the wrong direction. The Jem'Hadar flanked him and shot him in the back. It was a massacre. Computer freeze program, Shepard said. The holodeck froze. The security officers who died stood up, looking embarrassed and frustrated. Shepard walked among them, his expression unreadable. What did you do wrong? He asked. Silence. Anyone? A young ensign raised his hand tentatively. We didn't coordinate our fire. That's part of it. What else? Another officer spoke up. We didn't use cover effectively. You didn't use cover at all, Shepard corrected. He pointed to the officer who'd been shot while standing in the open. Why were you standing upright when the enemy engaged? The officer blinked. I was returning fire, sir. From a standing position, in the open, making yourself a target the size of a barn door. Shepard shook his head. In my galaxy, that gets you killed in the first 5 seconds, which, coincidentally, is exactly what happened here. He turned to the officer who'd charged. And you. Explain your tactical decision to run directly at armed hostiles. The officer flushed. I thought, aggressive action would get you shot, which it did. Shepard's voice wasn't cruel. Just matter of fact. Aggression without support is suicide. You want to advance on an enemy position? Fine, but you do it with covering fire, bounding overwatch, and a plan that doesn't involve hoping they miss. He walked to the center of the group. Cover isn't optional. It's survival. When you're under fire, you find the nearest solid object and you put it between you and the people trying to kill you. You don't stand up to return fire more effectively. You don't charge because it feels heroic. You use your brain. Worf stepped forward. The Jem'Hadar are formidable warriors. They are genetically engineered for combat. I noticed, Shepard said, which is why you can't fight them like amateurs. He turned back to the security team. Computer, reset simulation. We're doing this again, but this time, I'm going to teach you how to not die. 4 hours later. The security team was exhausted, drenched in sweat, but they were learning. Shepard had drilled them relentlessly. How to use cover properly, crouching, leaning, minimizing exposure. How to communicate, clear, concise updates on enemy positions and ammunition status. How to move under fire, bounding overwatch, one element covering while another advances. How to fall back without turning it into a rout. How to set up overlapping fields of fire so enemies couldn't approach without exposing themselves. By the 10th run-through, the security team held their position for 3 minutes before the Jem'Hadar overran them. By the 15th, they lasted 5 minutes and took down half the enemy force. By the 20th, they won. The simulation ended with all 12 security officers still standing, the Jem'Hadar forces eliminated, and the defensive position secured. For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of the ensigns started laughing, a wild, relieved sound. The laughter spread. Officers clapped each other on the back, grins splitting their exhausted faces. Shepard allowed himself a small smile. Not bad, you're still sloppy. Your communication needs work, and half of you are still exposing yourselves too much. But you survived. That's progress. One of the officers, a lieutenant named Chen, stepped forward, breathing hard. Commander, I've run that simulation a dozen times in training. Never lasted more than 2 minutes. How did we? You learned, Shepard said simply. You stopped thinking like scientists trying to defend yourselves and started thinking like soldiers defending a position. He looked around the group. This is just the beginning. If you want to survive real combat, you need to drill this until it's instinct, until you don't have to think about taking cover. You just do it. We understand, sir, Chen said, and the others nodded. Worf approached, his expression thoughtful. This is effective. It's basic infantry tactics, Shepard said. Nothing fancy, just fundamentals that keep people alive. Starfleet has never emphasized such training. I noticed. Shepard turned to face the Klingon. Commander, your people are brave, but bravery isn't enough. You need to give them the skills to back it up. Worf was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I agree. Shepard glanced at the security team, who were reviewing the simulation's tactical replay, discussing what they'd done right and wrong. Permission to continue training sessions, Commander Worf? Shepard asked. Worf's eyes gleamed. Permission granted. I will assign additional security teams for rotation. Good. Shepard looked back at the simulated battlefield. Because this was the easy part. Next, we teach them how to attack. Jellicoe sat alone, reading Worf's after-action report on Shepard's training session. The results were remarkable. A 400% improvement in survival rates, better tactical coordination, more efficient use of cover and fire discipline. Officers who'd struggled for months in simulations were now completing them successfully. But it was the final paragraph that made Jellicoe pause. Commander Shepard's methods are unconventional by Starfleet standards, but effective. His emphasis on practical survival skills rather than theoretical doctrine has transformed our security personnel's capabilities. However, his approach raises philosophical questions about Starfleet's identity. Are we becoming more militarized or simply more competent? I believe the latter, but others may disagree. Recommend continued training under Shepard's supervision. Lieutenant CMDR Worf. Jellicoe closed the pad and stared out the viewport. Starfleet had always prided itself on being explorers first, defenders second. The idea of professionalizing their combat capabilities felt like a betrayal of that identity. But 40% casualties. He thought of the officers he'd lost over the years. Good people, brave people. People who died because they didn't know how to survive. His comm badge chirped. Jellicoe here. Captain, this is Admiral Nechayev. I've reviewed Commander Worf's report. I want to expand the training program fleet-wide. Shepard's methods are exactly what Starfleet needs right now. Jellicoe closed his eyes. Admiral, with respect, changing our training doctrine this drastically could fundamentally alter what Starfleet represents. Starfleet represents the Federation's values, Captain, and those values include protecting our people. If Commander Shepard can teach our officers to survive, we have a moral obligation to listen. Jellicoe knew she was right. He hated that she was right. Understood, Admiral. I'll inform Commander Shepard. Good. And Captain, the Dominion isn't going to wait for us to figure this out. Whatever Shepard can teach us, we need to learn it fast. Nechayev out. The channel closed. Jellicoe sat in silence, the weight of command heavy on his shoulders. Then he stood, straightened his uniform, and headed for the holodeck. Because if Starfleet was going to change, he needed to see it for himself. 3 weeks after Commander Shepard began training security personnel aboard the USS Venture, the results reached Starfleet Command like a tactical grenade. Admiral Nechayev stood in the main briefing amphitheater, surrounded by 40 of Starfleet's senior officers, admirals, captains, and specialists from across the Federation. The holographic display behind her showed combat simulation statistics that made several officers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Gentlemen, ladies," Nechayev began, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "What you're looking at is 3 weeks of data from the USS Venture. Security teams trained under Commander Shepard's doctrine have shown a 400% improvement in combat simulation performance. Casualty rates in hostile engagement scenarios have dropped from 40% to 9%. Admiral William Ross, a veteran of the Dominion conflicts, leaned forward. 9%? That's extraordinary. It's unprecedented, Nechayev confirmed. And it's forcing us to ask difficult questions about how we've been training our people. Captain Solak of the Vulcan ship, Tukumbra, raised his hand. "Admiral, while the statistical improvement is logical, I must question the philosophical implications. Are we not risking the militarization of Starfleet by adopting combat-focused training protocols?" "That's exactly what we're here to discuss," Nechayev said. "Captain Picard, you've been reviewing the reports. Your thoughts?" Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood from his seat near the back. Even in a room full of senior officers, his presence commanded attention. The weight of his experience, his philosophical clarity, his unwavering commitment to Federation ideals. "Admiral," Picard said carefully, "I share Captain Solak's concerns. Starfleet's mission has always been exploration and diplomacy. Our strength comes not from our weapons, but from our principles. If we transform ourselves into a military force, we risk losing what makes the Federation unique." "With respect, Captain," Commander Benjamin Sisko interjected from his position near the front, "principles don't stop Jem'Hadar soldiers from killing our people. I've watched too many officers die because they weren't prepared for ground combat. If this Shepard can change that, I'm listening." The room erupted into crosstalk. Nechayev raised her hand. "Enough. Captain Picard, I'm assigning you to the Venture to assess this program firsthand. You'll observe Commander Shepard's methods, interview the personnel he's trained, and provide Starfleet Command with a comprehensive evaluation." Picard's expression was unreadable. "When do I leave?" "Immediately. The Enterprise will rendezvous with the Venture in the Kalandra sector." Nechayev's eyes swept the room. "The Dominion War is coming, whether we're ready or not. We need to decide what kind of Starfleet we're going to be when it arrives." Shepard stood in the center of a simulated urban combat zone, surrounded by 20 Starfleet security officers from 3 different ships. The holodeck had been reprogrammed with scenarios Shepard designed himself, asymmetric warfare situations where superior numbers and firepower weren't enough to win. You needed tactics, adaptability, creative thinking. "Listen up," Shepard called out. "You're a recon element operating behind enemy lines. Your mission is to locate and extract a high-value target from a hostile city. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and you have 0 support. What's your first priority?" "Intelligence gathering," Lieutenant Chen answered immediately. "Correct. You can't extract someone if you don't know where they are or what's guarding them." Shepard gestured to the holographic cityscape. Computer, begin scenario. Enemy forces, Jem'Hadar. Environmental factors, civilian population present. Rules of engagement, minimize collateral damage. The holodeck shimmered to life. The security officers moved, not like the scattered, panicked group Shepard had first encountered, but like a coordinated unit. They split into 3 fire teams. Designated scouts took point, and they used buildings for cover as they advanced. Shepard watched from observation mode, his tactical HUD analyzing their every move. They located the target in 18 minutes. A simulated Starfleet officer held in a fortified building guarded by a dozen Jem'Hadar. Instead of charging in, they set up overwatch positions, designated fields of fire, and created a distraction using a small explosive device to draw guards away from the target's location. The extraction took 7 minutes. 2 officers sustained simulated injuries, acceptable losses given the scenario's difficulty. Computer freeze program. The holodeck froze. Shepard stepped into the scenario, approaching the security teams. Not bad. You adapted to the situation, minimized casualties, and completed the objective. Chen, what was your biggest challenge? Maintaining unit cohesion while operating in 3 separate elements, Chen answered. Communication lag almost compromised the extraction. Good awareness. That's why you drill comm protocols until they're second nature. Shepard turned to another officer. Ensign Tivin, you hesitated when the Jem'Hadar patrol came around the corner. Why? The Vulcan officer considered. I was calculating the probability of successful engagement versus the risk of alerting additional hostiles. And I concluded that evasion was the logical choice, which was correct. Sometimes the best tactical decision is not to fight. Shepard looked around the group. You're learning to think like soldiers, not just react, but analyze, adapt, and choose the course of action that maximizes mission success and minimizes casualties. That's what keeps you alive. The door to the holodeck opened. Captain Jellicoe entered, followed by a man Shepard didn't recognize. Older, balding, carrying himself with the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded for decades. Commander Shepard, Jellicoe said, this is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. He's here to evaluate your training program. Shepard studied Picard for a moment. The captain's expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes were sharp, assessing. Captain Picard, Shepard said, extending his hand. I've heard about you. The officer who made first contact with the Borg. Picard shook his hand. And I've heard about you. The soldier from another reality who's teaching Starfleet how to fight. Teaching them how to survive, Shepard corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Picard's voice was mild, but the challenge was clear. Shepard smiled faintly. Let's find out. You want to evaluate my methods? Join the next simulation. See for yourself what we're doing here. Picard raised an eyebrow. I'm not a security officer, Commander. You're a Starfleet captain who's faced the Borg, the Cardassians, and a dozen other threats. You know combat. I'm curious to see how you handle infantry tactics. The security officers watched the exchange with barely concealed interest. Picard considered for a moment. Then he removed his jacket. Very well, I accept. Computer, load program Shepard Delta 7. Difficulty, advanced. The holodeck transformed into a nightmare scenario. A Federation colony under siege. Burning buildings, civilian casualties. A heavily fortified enemy position holding critical infrastructure that, if destroyed, would doom the remaining population. Picard found himself equipped with a standard phaser rifle, standing among a mixed security team. Shepard stood beside him, similarly armed. Your objective, Shepard said, is to capture that fortified position without destroying it. You've got 30 minutes before enemy reinforcements arrive and the mission becomes impossible. How do you proceed? Picard scanned the tactical situation. The enemy, more Jem'Hadar, held the high ground, had superior numbers, and controlled all approaches to the target building. A frontal assault would be suicide. We need to divide their attention, Picard said. Create multiple vectors of approach. Force them to split their defenses. Good start, Shepard said. How? Picard thought quickly. A feint. One team draws their fire from the east, while two other teams approach from the north and south, using the buildings for cover. Acceptable, but you're still taking casualties with the feint team. Not if we use drones, Lieutenant Chen suggested. Deploy automated units to simulate troop movements. The Jem'Hadar sensors won't distinguish them from real targets immediately. Shepard grinned. Excellent. Now you're thinking asymmetrically. Picard, your team will execute. You have command. Picard organized the teams with surprising efficiency for someone who claimed not to be a security officer. He designated Chen's group as the drone operators, positioned the northern team to exploit a weakness in the enemy's field of fire, and personally led the southern approach. The simulation began. The drone feint worked perfectly. Jem'Hadar warriors opened fire on the simulated targets, exposing their positions. Chen's team fed real-time tactical data to the assault elements. Picard moved through the urban environment with practiced caution, using cover effectively, coordinating his team's advance with hand signals when comm silence was necessary. They reached the objective with minimal casualties. But then the reinforcements arrived, earlier than expected. "Adapt!" Shepard called out. "Mission parameters just changed. What's your play?" Picard didn't hesitate. "Secure the objective and prepare for defensive operations. We hold until extraction arrives." "No extraction is coming," Shepard said. "You're on your own." Picard's jaw tightened. "Then we make our own exit. Chen, can your drones create a corridor through the enemy reinforcements?" "Negative, sir. Not enough units." Picard looked at Shepard. "Then we need a new plan." "So make one." Picard studied the tactical display. The enemy was closing from three sides. Conventional retreat was impossible. Unless... "The colony has a drainage system," Picard said, pointing to the schematics. "Underground tunnels that connect to the spaceport. We use them to bypass the enemy forces above ground." Shepard's eyes gleamed. "Risky. Those tunnels weren't designed for combat operations. You'll be vulnerable in confined spaces. Better than being surrounded and overrun. Execute." Picard led the team into the drainage system. The tunnels were dark, claustrophobic, and filled with simulated debris. Jem'Hadar forces followed, turning the retreat into a running firefight through narrow corridors. Officers took turns providing covering fire while others advanced, bounding Overwatch in the most hostile environment possible. They lost 3 people, simulated casualties, but the remaining team made it to the spaceport and secured an escape route. Computer, end simulation. The holodeck returned to its default grid. Picard stood breathing hard, his uniform stained with simulated dirt and blood. Around him, the security team looked equally exhausted but triumphant. Shepard approached. "Not bad for someone who's not a security officer." Picard managed a slight smile. "I may have understated my experience. You adapted under pressure, sacrificed the perfect solution for the achievable one, kept your people alive when the situation deteriorated." Shepard nodded approvingly. "That's good command." "That was also brutal," Picard said quietly. "We lost 3 people. In the simulation, in real life, those 3 officers would be alive because you made hard choices instead of heroic ones." Shepard's expression was serious. "Captain, I've read about some of your missions. You faced impossible odds and survived. But you did it through improvisation, individual heroism, and frankly, a lot of luck. That works for you. But the officers under your command, they need more than luck." Picard was silent for a long moment. Then he looked at the security team. Young officers who just survived a nightmare scenario through training, discipline, and teamwork. "What you're teaching them," Picard said slowly, "is survival through preparation rather than courage alone." "Courage gets you killed if you don't know how to use it," Shepard said. "I'm not trying to take away anyone's bravery. I'm trying to make sure that bravery accomplishes something." Picard nodded thoughtfully. "May we speak privately, Commander?" "Of course." Picard and Shepard sat across from each other, the vast starfield visible through the windows. "I came here," Picard said, expecting to find someone trying to militarize Starfleet, to transform us into something we're not. And? Shepard asked. And instead, I found someone trying to keep Starfleet officers alive. Picard leaned forward. But I'm troubled, Commander. Your methods are effective, I can't deny that. But effectiveness isn't the only measure that matters. Starfleet's identity is built on principles: exploration, peace, the belief that there are alternatives to violence. I'm not asking you to abandon those principles, Shepard said. I'm asking you to survive long enough to practice them. That's a narrow line. It's the only line that matters when people are dying. Picard was quiet, considering. In my galaxy, Shepard continued, we fight because we have to. Against the Geth, the Collectors, the Reapers, species that want us extinct. We don't have the luxury of choosing peace. We choose survival. But you? He gestured out the window at the stars. You've built something remarkable. A civilization that actually tries to avoid war. That's worth protecting. Even if it means changing who we are. You're not changing who you are. You're learning how to defend what you believe in. Shepard met Picard's eyes. Captain, you fight to protect others. That's noble. But if you don't know how to fight effectively, all you're doing is dying nobly. And dead idealists don't save anyone. Picard steepled his fingers. You believe we can maintain our principles while adopting your methods. I believe you have to, because your enemies sure as hell aren't going to give you a choice. Another long silence. Then Picard spoke. I will recommend to Starfleet Command that your training program be expanded, but I want to be clear, we will not become a military force. We will remain explorers who know how to defend ourselves. Shepard extended his hand. That's all I'm asking. Picard shook it. Then we have an accord. Commander Benjamin Sisko stood on the upper level of ops, watching the flow of traffic through the station's viewport. His first officer, Major Kira Nerys, approached with a pad. Benjamin, you need to see this. Sisko took the pad. It was a Starfleet intelligence report. Dominion fleet movements, massive, coordinated, heading toward Federation space. When? Sisko asked quietly. 3 weeks, maybe less. Sisko closed his eyes. The war everyone feared was finally coming. Get me Starfleet Command, he said, and find out if this Commander Shepard can teach our people what they need to know in 3 weeks. Kira's expression was grim. You think 3 weeks is enough? Sisko looked at the incoming Dominion fleet markers on the tactical display. It has to be. The sun was setting over the bay, casting golden light across the training grounds where generations of Starfleet officers had learned their craft. Today, those grounds looked different. Obstacle courses, live fire ranges, tactical simulation centers. What had once been predominantly academic facilities now incorporated elements that would have seemed out of place 3 months ago. Commander Shepard stood on the observation deck, watching 200 cadets run through urban combat drills. Their movements were sharper than they'd been weeks ago. Better use of cover, better communication, better fire discipline. Not perfect, but improving. Captain Picard joined him at the railing, 2 cups of tea in hand. He offered one to Shepard. Earl Grey, Picard said. Hot. A human tradition I've grown fond of. Shepard accepted it with a nod of thanks. Never developed a taste for tea. Coffee black. Soldier's drink. They stood in companionable silence, watching the cadets work. They're learning, Picard observed. But I see the cost in their eyes. They came here to explore the stars, and now they're learning how to kill. They're learning how to survive, Shepard corrected gently. There's a difference, Captain. I'm not teaching them to seek violence. I'm teaching them what to do when violence finds them. Picard sipped his tea, a distinction that grows narrower with each passing day. Before Shepard could respond, both their comm badges chirped simultaneously. Red alert! All senior officers report to Starfleet Command immediately. Priority 1. Picard and Shepard exchanged glances. The Dominion, Picard said quietly. It was only a matter of time. The room was packed with Starfleet's senior leadership. Admirals, captains, intelligence officers, all focused on the massive holographic display dominating the center of the chamber. Admiral William Ross stood at the podium, his expression grave. 2 hours ago, Ross began, a Dominion fleet crossed into Federation territory. 300 ships, Jem'Hadar warships, Cardassian cruisers, and Breen support vessels. They've already engaged our forces at Beta Z. The hologram shifted, showing real-time tactical data. Starfleet ships, blue icons, fighting desperately against overwhelming red contacts. The casualty count was climbing. Our fleet is outnumbered 3-1, Ross continued. We're taking heavy losses. Conventional tactics aren't working. The Jem'Hadar are bred for war, and they're better at it than we are. Captain Sisko spoke up from his position near the display. What are our options? Limited, Admiral Nechayev said, standing. We can reinforce Beta Z and risk leaving other sectors vulnerable, or we can fall back and cede the system. Unacceptable, Captain Solak said. Beta Z is home to 3 billion Federation citizens. I'm aware, Captain, Nechayev said coldly, which is why we need alternatives. All eyes turned to Shepard. He'd been standing quietly at the back of the room, analyzing the tactical display with the practiced eye of someone who'd fought 1,000 battles. Commander Shepard, Ross said, you've been advising Starfleet for 3 months. You've seen our capabilities and our limitations. Well, what do you recommend? Shepard stepped forward, studying the hologram. The Dominion fleet was positioned in a standard assault formation, overwhelming force applied directly to break enemy defenses. Brutal, effective, predictable. You can't beat them with conventional tactics, Shepard said. They're better trained, better equipped, and they outnumber you. If you fight them the way they expect, you'll lose. Then what do you suggest? Picard asked. Shepard manipulated the hologram, highlighting key positions. You fight them the way they don't expect. Asymmetric warfare. You've got advantages they don't. Superior sensors, transporter technology, and a network of starbases and colonies that can be turned into force multipliers. He gestured to the display. The Dominion expects you to defend Beta Z directly. Don't. Pull your fleet back to secondary positions here, here, and here. He marked 3 locations forming a triangle around the planet. Draw them deeper into Federation space. Admiral Ross frowned. That would leave Beta Z vulnerable to orbital bombardment. In the short term, yes, but while they're focused on the planet, you hit their supply lines. Shepard highlighted the Dominion rear positions. They can't sustain a 300-ship fleet without logistics. Cut off their supply convoys, disrupt their communications, force them to split their forces to protect their assets. A guerrilla campaign, Sisko said, understanding dawning. We become the insurgents in our own space. Exactly. You can't match their firepower, so you don't try. You make every kilometer of space they occupy cost them ships, resources, and time. Why, you force them to fight on your terms, not theirs. Captain Solak raised an eyebrow. This strategy requires precise coordination across multiple task forces. The margin for error is minimal. War doesn't have wide margins, Shepard said. You work with what you've got. Admiral Nechayev leaned forward. And the ground campaign? The Jem'Hadar will deploy ground forces to Beta Z's major cities. Shepard's expression hardened. That's where your training pays off. You've been drilling security teams in urban combat for 3 months. Deploy them in small mobile units. Hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, electronic warfare. Make the Jem'Hadar pay for every street. We'll still take casualties? Picard said quietly. Yes, Shepard agreed. But fewer than if you fight them their way. And the casualties you do take will mean something. They'll be buying time, inflicting damage, and keeping your people alive long enough to matter. The room fell silent as the assembled officers processed the plan. Finally, Admiral Ross spoke. It's risky. It violates conventional fleet doctrine, and it requires every ship, every officer, every security team to execute perfectly. Yes, sir, Shepard said. It does. Ross looked at the casualty report still streaming in from Beta Z. Then he nodded. Do it. All task forces will implement Commander Shepard's strategy. Captain Picard, you'll coordinate the fleet elements. Commander Sisko, you'll handle ground force deployment. Commander Shepard, he paused, you'll serve as tactical advisor to all operations. We're putting Starfleet's future in your hands. Shepard met his gaze steadily. Then let's make sure it has a future. The Jem'Hadar first strode through the ruins of what had been Beta Z's largest spaceport, his soldiers securing the perimeter. 300 Federation civilians huddled in a makeshift detention area, guarded by a dozen Jem'Hadar warriors. Status, the first demanded. A Jem'Hadar second approached. The city is secure. Starfleet forces have retreated. Orbital defenses are destroyed. We control all major infrastructure. Victory is efficiency, the first intoned, the Dominion mantra. Victory is efficiency, his soldiers echoed. Then the first explosion hit. A warehouse 2 blocks away erupted in flames. Not a random detonation, but a precisely placed charge that collapsed the building onto a Jem'Hadar supply depot. The first's head snapped toward the sound. Report! Enemy contact! Multiple small units attacking from... Another explosion. Then another. Fire teams of Starfleet security officers, moving fast, hitting hard, and disappearing before the Jem'Hadar could respond. The first activated his communicator. All units spread out, locate and eliminate. A phaser shot took him in the chest. He dropped, and chaos erupted. Starfleet security teams poured out of buildings, using the tactics Shepard had drilled into them, overlapping fields of fire, bounding overwatch, coordinated strikes. They weren't trying to hold ground. They were inflicting casualties and withdrawing before the Jem'Hadar could concentrate their forces. Lieutenant Chen led one team, in her voice calm over the comm. Delta Team, suppress that position. Bravo, flank left and secure the civilians. Copy that. The Jem'Hadar fought back with brutal efficiency, but for the first time, they were facing an enemy that refused to stand and die. An enemy that moved like soldiers. Within 10 minutes, the Starfleet teams had freed the civilians, destroyed 2 supply caches, and eliminated 30 Jem'Hadar warriors. Then they vanished into the city's ruins. The surviving Jem'Hadar second stared at the burning wreckage, his weapon raised, searching for targets that were no longer there. What were those tactics? A younger warrior asked. The second didn't answer, because for the first time in his genetically engineered life, he didn't know. Commander Sisko stood at the center of his bridge, the cramped warship humming with barely contained power. The Defiant was a warship, one of the few vessels Starfleet had designed purely for combat, and today, she was going to earn her keep. Tactical, status on the Dominion supply convoy? Sisko asked. Lieutenant Commander Worf, now serving as Sisko's tactical officer, checked his console. 3 freighters, escorted by 2 Jem'Hadar attack ships. They are maintaining course for Beta Z. Perfect. Sisko turned to his helmsman. Ensign Nog, plot an intercept course. Bring us in fast and low, using the moon's gravitational shadow to mask our approach. Aye, sir. The Defiant dropped out of warp, skimming the edge of a barren moon, her hull nearly invisible against the gray surface. The Dominion convoy never saw them coming. Quantum torpedoes, fire, Sisko ordered. 4 blue-white torpedoes streaked from the Defiant's launchers, impacting the lead freighter before its shields could fully activate. The ship disintegrated in a brilliant explosion. The Jem'Hadar escorts reacted instantly, breaking formation to engage. Evasive pattern Delta 7, Sisko commanded. Worf, target their weapons arrays. The Defiant twisted through space, her ablative armor absorbing hits that would have crippled a standard Starfleet vessel. Worf's phaser banks tore into the first escort, disabling its engines. Second escort is charging weapons, Nog shouted. Hard to port, return fire. The bridge shook as disruptor fire grazed their shields, but the Defiant's pulse phasers shredded the second escort's hull. Both Jem'Hadar ships drifted, crippled. The remaining freighters tried to flee, but Sisko was relentless. No survivors, he said coldly. Destroy them. The freighters exploded. Their cargo, weapons, equipment, reinforcements scattered into the void. Sisko stood, breathing hard. "Helm, set course for Rally Point Gamma. We have 7 more convoys to hit before dawn." "Aye, sir." As the Defiant jumped to warp, leaving only debris behind, Worf turned to Sisko. "Commander Shepard's tactics are effective." Sisko's expression was grim. "They better be, because we're fighting a war now, and there's no turning back." The Vorta Overseer stood before a holographic projection of the battlefield, his pleasant expression finally cracking into frustration. "Explain," he demanded, addressing the Jem'Hadar first. "How we have lost 14 supply convoys, suffered 30% casualties in urban combat. Saren made 0 progress in securing this planet despite overwhelming numerical superiority." The First's jaw clenched. "The enemy has changed their tactics. They no longer fight conventionally. They strike from concealment, disrupt our supply lines, and refuse direct engagement. Then adapt. We are attempting to, but..." The First hesitated. "They are learning faster than we anticipated. Their soldiers move with precision we have not encountered before. They use terrain, technology, and unpredictability in ways that our tactical database does not account for." The Vorta's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying Starfleet has become competent?" "I am saying," the First said carefully, "that they have learned how to fight a war." The Vorta was silent for a long moment. Then he activated his communicator. "Contact the Founders. Inform them that the campaign for Beta Z will require additional resources. Starfleet is no longer the enemy we expected." The transmission sent, the Vorta turned back to the tactical display. And for the first time since the war began, he felt something the Dominion rarely experienced: uncertainty. 3 weeks later, the Dominion fleet withdrew. Not routed, not destroyed, but withdrawn. The cost of holding Beta Z had become unsustainable. Every supply convoy lost, every ambush, every street fought for meter by meter. The Jem'Hadar were dying in numbers they couldn't replace, and the Founders had calculated that the strategic value of the planet no longer justified the losses. Starfleet had won, not through superior firepower, not through heroic sacrifices, but through tactics, discipline, and the willingness to fight smart instead of hard. Captain Picard sat across from Commander Shepard, a bottle of Chateau Picard wine between them. "To survival," Picard said, raising his glass. "To survival," Shepard echoed, clinking glasses. They drank in silence for a moment. "You saved us," Picard said quietly. 3 months ago, we would have lost Beta Z, lost thousands of ships, lost millions of lives. But your training, your tactics, they gave us a chance." Shepard shook his head. "I didn't save you. You saved yourselves. I just showed you how." "Will you stay?" Picard asked. "Help us continue this work?" Shepard looked out the viewport at the stars, so similar to his own galaxy, yet so different in what they represented. In his universe, the stars meant danger, conflict, the Reapers. Here, they meant hope. "Yeah," Shepard said finally. "I'll stay. Someone has to make sure you don't forget what you've learned." Picard smiled. "Then welcome to Starfleet, Commander." The war with the Dominion would continue for years. But something had fundamentally changed within Starfleet. Officers no longer trained as scientists who occasionally fought. They trained as explorers who knew how to defend what they believed in. Security teams drilled with the same intensity as engineering teams studied warp theory. Tactical doctrine evolved from reactive defense to proactive strategy, and at the center of it all stood Commander Caden Shepard, the soldier from another reality who taught the Federation that strength and principles weren't mutually exclusive. Starfleet didn't become militarized. It became competent. Captains still sought peaceful solutions first. Diplomacy remained the Federation's primary tool. Exploration continued to be Starfleet's core mission. But when peace failed, when enemies threatened the Federation's people, its worlds, its ideals, Starfleet no longer bled needlessly. They fought, and they won. Captain Picard stood on the bridge of the Enterprise, watching a distant nebula through the view screen. Beside him, Commander Shepard reviewed tactical reports on a pad. "You know," Picard said thoughtfully, "I once believed that our strength came solely from our principles, that our commitment to peace was what made us special." "And now?" Shepard asked. "Now I understand that principles must be defended, that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the triumph of those willing to protect it." Picard looked at Shepard. "You didn't change what we believe. You taught us how to keep believing." Shepard smiled. "That's all any soldier can ask for." Captain." In the distance, a distress signal reached the Enterprise. An unknown vessel, damaged, requesting assistance. Picard straightened. "Helm, set intercept course. Let's see what we can do." The Enterprise turned toward the signal, her crew ready for whatever came next. Explorers, diplomats, defenders, and most importantly, survivors. Because the Federation had learned the most important lesson of all. You can reach for the stars without forgetting how to fight for them. And somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, threats still waited. The Borg, the Dominion, unknown horrors yet to emerge. But they would find a Federation that had changed, one that still valued peace above all else, but knew how to wage war when peace wasn't an option. Commander Shepard stood on the Enterprise's observation deck, looking out at the infinite stars. In his universe, he'd fought to save humanity from extinction. In this one, he'd taught humanity to save itself. And as the ship jumped to warp, racing toward another crisis, another mission, another chance to prove that explorers could be warriors when necessary, Shepard realized he'd found something he thought he'd lost forever: purpose. The Federation didn't need him to fight their battles. They needed him to teach them how to fight their own. And that was a mission worth staying for. The Federation stands ready. We explore in peace. We defend with strength. And we will never again sacrifice our people to unpreparedness. This is our promise. This is our future. Starfleet out. The stars awaited. And the Federation, explorer and defender, scientist and soldier, dreamer and warrior, was ready to meet them.